We're sort of unique, folks, in that we don't just cherry pick the high profile cases. We work hard to make sure that everyone gets help, that no one's left on the side of the road anywhere in the United States. We have a huge network of volunteer affiliate attorneys all across the country. We have offices in 5 states, soon to be 6 states. I'm going to mention that a little later. We haven't announced it yet, but I'm going to be announcing it for the first time on this Zoom call. And we're very excited about what we're involved in and what we're accomplishing. We also work hard to really make sure that people's needs are actually served. So we deal with a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds, several thousand every year, all without charge. Never hesitate to contact us. Also, I want to state right up front, I know a number of you, especially a number of your churches, support our work at Pacific Justice Institute. That's great. And we really, really appreciate that. That said, it's never a requirement to get help or representation from Pacific Justice. We pick up all the costs, all the expenses. We'll represent you, whether or not you support our work or not. That is who we are. That's what we're about. We're a true, bona fide servant philosophy, and we try to practice that in every way. So never hesitate to contact us, whether or not you are part of our team and support our work or not. And I want to make sure that's very clear up front. Now, we have a number of people we're going to be talking to today as we move forward. And as we do that, I wanted to talk about a number of things. One is what's going on in the state of Washington. We've seen some exciting things take place here in Washington State. And to talk about that, we have Jorge Ramos, who's our attorney representative for the state of Washington in the Seattle area. Jorge, tell me what's going on in Washington State, and specifically, you had I understand, a very important meeting just about an hour ago there in the state of Washington on behalf of some pastors with the meeting with the governor's office. What happened, and where are things in Washington State?
Sure, thanks, Brad. So yeah, I just got off a Zoom conference with Rochelle Davis from Governor Inslee's office. She's his senior policy advisor. I had arranged this meeting. There were 5 Calvary Chapel pastors who reached out and we were able to get this together. And some good things came out of it. You know, I can see questions on the side here that pastors from Washington wanting to know when they can get going and what's going on. And I can report a few things. She said that in conversations with Governor Inslee, that they do see some opportunity to stray from that outline that we received last week, the phases. To me, that's very positive and encouraging. So I encourage all Washington pastors to continue their efforts. It is working, he is listening, and he feels some pressure there. He also, and when I say he, this is through her, he also did speak to pastors. There might be some on here. He held an 11:15 conference call with several faith leaders, is what they called it. So it wasn't just Christians. It was all types here in Washington. That was today at 11:15. And that was Inslee expressing that he also does see a good potential for outdoor services. So possibly there could be a rollout of, well, let's do outdoor services first, because there's now scientific evidence that shows that there is just the outbreaks compared to the indoor environment are so much lower that it's safe right now to gather outside more than inside. So I could see that actually being a potential here in Washington. I know some churches may not have that possibility, so we still have a problem there, and we'll work on that. But they also mentioned, so if they do let us allow to move forward with 50%, how do churches feel about potentially not being able to hand out communion or the Lord's Supper? That's something that all the pastors from Washington would have to think about and plan for. That's obviously something the governor is contemplating what to do about communion, and also asked about baptisms. So I think it's positive that he's asking these types of questions. And this comes on the heel of a great victory, which I'll let Joshua Freed, who's with us, talk about last week, where there was more clarification exactly what type of enforcement Washington is going to do. I pointed out to Rochelle on our conference that we know of no arrests or enforcement or fines. Their remedy or enforcement would be a gross misdemeanor. No one has been arrested, no pastor, no congregate. So I wanted to know if they were to start a service this weekend, would they arrest that person? She was very hesitant to even answer, but as we know, it's up to the local level. So we encourage you guys to speak to your sheriffs, your local council members, things like that. I know Mason County, for one, is getting on top of that. And I also heard from a pastor in Kent that the mayor said she would not have any of her law enforcement enforce this order. So with that, yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think what you said is very important to take note of, because the governor can say, we're going to arrest everyone, okay? But it's really up to local law enforcement. I mean, it's the local police, it's the county police and the sheriffs. At the end of the day, the general rule, they're the ones who are making the decision. And so that's why it's so important. I want to double repeat what you said, the importance of it. That is to talk to local law enforcement and to talk to them and just say, you know, hey, here's our checklist. We're going to talk about this a little later, but here's our checklist. This is what we're going to planning on using when we do reopen, and also make a point to say to them that you know, this is, if you see something here that needs to be you know, changed. You know, we've talked to attorneys, the CDC. This is actually the highest standard that we could possibly come up with. But if you see that we've missed something in any way, feel free to let us know. And also, if you want us to let you know when we're going to open our church or have our church service, or what kind of service, if you want us to let you know that, you know, let us know. We'll be happy to do that. Sort of put it in their corner. A lot of people, I think, in law enforcement and sheriffs and all, a lot of them really don't want to know. But the fact that you've given them that checklist saying, this is what we're using, you're giving them notice that they don't have to speculate of everyone in there holding hands and coughing each other's face and all being close. They'll know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it and the whole process. And that gives you some definite cover, and it gives them some cover to know, okay, we don't have to be quite so paranoid. We know what they're going to do, and they've given us notice of it. I really recommend that. It's very important. And also know what law enforcement to talk to. General rule is, if you're in a city and your county sheriff says, okay, I'm not going to enforce it against you, that doesn't mean the city police have the same attitude. So if you're in the county, non-incorporated, it's the county, it's the sheriff. If you're in an incorporated area, then it's a local law for the city law enforcement. So be sure and take that to heart. Now, I understand, Jorge, you're going to introduce someone who was involved in a real important lawsuit dealing with the rights of individuals to be able just to pray one-on-one, to have a Bible study one-on-one. Go ahead and make that introduction, because I know the audience is going to want to hear this good news.
Sure. Last Friday, and this case made news, Fox News, local news as well. Joshua Freed's on the line. He's running for governor here, Washington State. His lawyer, Mark Lamb, great guy, also was his lawyer in this. And I'd like for him to talk more. That actually what the news reported wasn't exactly what came out of it, and I'd just like for him to expand on that for everybody here.
Great. Jorge, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to see you again. And Brad, I appreciate the invite as well. So about 8 weeks we've been under the stay-at-home order in Washington State with the direction of the governor that we're not supposed to be participating in spiritual activities, religious activities, unless it's online. He's given that a thumbs up, or a thumbs down rather. And he's saying that we can go to pot shops where we have liquor stores here that are essential. You can go get an abortion. You can go meet with your stock advisor, and you can actually go golfing and stand on the golf tee. But if the conversation turned to prayer or Bible study, that was against the rules and the directives of our governor. And so I filed suit in federal court 3 weeks ago. And the basis of it was that my wife and I have been leading Bible studies in our homes for the last few years with 25 to 50 people. And then a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I filed for what's called a TRO, which is a temporary restraining order. We took that from the larger number down to a very minute level of just me meeting individually in my front yard with somebody bringing their own chairs, their own PPE. And then for the last 2 weeks, the Attorney General and our Governor Inslee argued with 156 pages and 4 separate court documents saying that we did not have the right to pray and have Bible study in my front yard. So we were going back and forth. Ultimately, on Friday of last week at 1:30, we met online in federal court with a judge that was appointed by Bush, obviously many years ago. And that judge put the Attorney General in the corner and said Does your client, the leading law enforcer of the land, Jay Inslee, have the right, and will he enforce against spiritual gatherings? And the Attorney General acknowledged that per the Constitution, they do not have the right to shut down spiritual gatherings. And so I removed my TRO of one-on-one meetings. And now we believe that obviously one-on-one meetings can occur. We believe that small groups can occur of 25 to 50 people. So last Saturday, I had a Bible study with 4 folks. Sunday morning, I invited people over to our home. We had 25 people for church service as we watched our larger church service for the church that I attend. But it was a great victory. My attorneys believe that we don't need a lawsuit anymore because they believe that the governor acknowledged that he does not have the legal right to infringe on our First Amendment rights that are protected under our U.S. Constitution, as well as Article 1 of our state constitution. So I don't know if I could take one more minute, Jorge or Brad.
Well, we're on a real tight schedule. Can you make it less than that? Go ahead, real quickly.
No, I mean, so a lot of pastors have been reaching out and saying, what can you do? My suggestion is, because I'm a believer in Christ, that we need to consider the optics of people who are on the outside. So I'm encouraging for people to have still Bible study online, have parking lot Bible studies, and then small group gatherings inside, because we do want to be a witness to our community. We're not controlled in our faith, but we definitely want to have an incremental approach that allows people to their safety level to participate in their faith. Thanks,
Excellent.
Brad.
I'm glad. Thank you. And I really appreciate what you did. You could have just done nothing, but you didn't. You stood up and you did so in a Christ-like manner. And I love what you're saying at the end, because it shows where your heart's at, where all our hearts need to be, which is not focused on our rights, but our eyes and focused on Christ and being an example and a witness for Christ and our testimony through this whole process. I really appreciate that. Good job. And all the best to you and all your endeavors to have an influence up there in the state of Washington. I would like to, by the way, make sure I mention this disclaimer. It's very important that I mention this. As a licensed attorney in the state of California and in the state of Texas, I am obligated to in no way ever encourage any of you to in any way violate the law at all. And I want to make that very clear, that this conversation and discussion today is dealing with the consequences of different decisions which may end up violating the law. But in no way, by any means, am I encouraging anyone to violate the law, and I want to make that very clear. Okay, with that said, also I want to remind you of something else that's important. Many of you think that the PPP program, that is where you are able to get money from the federal government to help keep your people employed and are compensated for that, then it's forgiven after after a period of time. That's still active, folks, and there's still billions of dollars still available for you to take advantage of that. If any of you are looking, saying, well, I want to do it, but I can't find a bank or lender, I know of one place. You can go on the website for the Evangelical Christian Credit Union. I think it's ECCU.org, I believe. And on there, you can get information to help pastors in all 50 states. There's an entity they work with. I just want to make sure I mention that. Now, to also talk about some of the challenges taking place as we make decisions to open up and follow God's call and direction to do so. We have with us on the line now Emily Mimnaugh. Emily is one of our attorneys. She heads up our office in the state of Nevada. Emily, you've been dealing with a church that's been wanting to move ahead. I want you to talk about that and how they're dealing with the challenge of opening up in view of some of the pushback that they may have received recently.
Hi, Brad. Sure. So real quick, in Nevada, we are under a statewide order. We do not have the patchwork of local ordinances like in California and other places as well. So right now, what we got last Wednesday was a revision. So originally we were being told we could not have any form of worship service. You couldn't have indoor, you couldn't have outdoor, you couldn't have a drive-in service. Drive-in people coming up in their cars, not getting out. So we got a new order saying that we could have a form of drive-in service, and we looked at the language very carefully, and the way that we thought it could be interpreted and interpreted fairly was to say that you could have a drive-in service, and the wording in our order was that it needed to be, the pastor needed to, quote, allow parishioners to stay in their cars. So we designed a type of worship service where people can come in their cars and then the service is set up so that people can stay in their cars, but doesn't say that the churches have to require people to stay in their cars. So we had a pastor in Las Vegas concerned about the weather and, of course, the health of his parishioners, who organized a service where we told people, you know what, the church is not going to provide seating for you. And that's what they did. The church did not provide seating, and people who attended, some people brought their own seating, and they did. They sat outside of the car during part of the service. They were observing social distancing, and it was, it was great. They had it at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night, so the weather was a little more friendly. In Vegas, it's hot, it's the desert. They were having a heat wave, but you had people in their trucks, in the bed of their trucks. One person was sat up on top of their car. People were social distancing, and it was a really nice way to have a type of hybrid service. So moving in the direction of an outdoor service, but definitely complying with all of the social distancing requirements for our state. And on top of that, for the church, it was a little bit easier not to have to worry about providing chairs, disinfecting them, and complying with those parts, when people could bring it from their own home, use it for themselves, and then bring it back. So it was a nice way, I think, to have an outdoor service combined with the drive-in service, complying with the spirit of the law, complying with the law, and bringing people together. So it was great.
Yeah, Emily, I think that's great, because that's a real example of how a church dealt with some of the circumstances. I like the idea. They had like a drive-in service, but it wasn't a strict drive-in service, because people could actually got out. It's sort of like you say, a hybrid. They brought their own chairs. And I think that was a great idea, because then you don't have the worry and the issues of sterilizing the chairs. They touch the chairs, they set up, they bring them out, they leave, proper distancing, masks, etc. I think that's a fantastic way to go for a lot of churches that are not in a situation where they want to have an indoor service, and maybe not even like a full outdoor service per se. I think that's actually a very wise measure to take. And that's what we're trying to give pastors in these circumstances. I'm getting lots of calls myself, our other attorneys, is we're asking the questions about, where are you located? What are you dealing with? What are your risks? And trying to help them work through understanding the consequences, while at the same time, of course, never advising any of them to violate the law. So I already mentioned that disclaimer once. I'll mention it again. I also now want to talk to someone who was just in court just within the last couple hours in the state of Oregon, a very important case. Now, we've heard about Wisconsin, and I think Michael may be mentioning that a little later. But in Oregon, we were litigating to challenge the Governor Katie Brown's executive order to shut down churches, shut down businesses. We did our research, and we challenged that. Ray Hackey is on the line now to talk about what happened in court today as he made those arguments, and what does it look like moving forward. Ray, go ahead.
Thank you, Brad. Well, basically, we challenged Governor Brown's orders under a certain provision of the Constitution, or basically, we argued that that her orders are no longer in effect because she failed to follow a certain part of the Constitution. That would be Article 10A, Section 6, which says that she initially has 30 days to deal with an emergency. If she needs more of this nature, if she needs more time, then she has to involve the legislature. She has to get a 3/5 vote of each house of the legislature, and this she did not do. Her initial order of 2003 at the outset, declaring the state of emergency, was thus invalid because she said it would stay in place for 60 days. Her most recent order, she actually issued one this morning, but the most recent one before that, number 2024, extended that original order, and she had no authority to do that. In between, she issued her stay-at-home order, which basically keeps all free, law-abiding Oregonians under house arrest. They cannot leave their house for any non-essential reason, and gatherings of any size are prohibited where they can't social distance. So really, this handcuffs a lot of churches in their ability to effectively serve people. Even the social distancing requirement is problematic because it prevents churches from doing things like laying hands on one another in prayer.
Right. Well, Ray, real quick, I don't want to run out of time here, but get too much into the semantics. But the bottom line, though, the real bottom line focus that I think people will need to understand is that churches have not been able to do what God's called them to do. That's the big picture, as we've talked about before. Churches have been limited to, many churches have not been able to open because of these restrictions. So this could be a huge breakthrough. And I believe, Ray, my personal opinion, I want to get your feedback on this. To what extent do you think this could impact other governors to rethink their potential reissuing of their executive orders where it may be questionable with regards to their legal or constitutional rights to do so?
Well, I think the dominoes are already starting to fall. I mean, just yesterday, within the past 24 hours, the Wisconsin Supreme Court handed down an order issued saying that the governor had, overstepped his executive power, and abused it and infringed on the rights of Wisconsinites. And the same thing, and something similar is being argued here, that even if there was a need for the governor to do what she did at the outset, the need is, basically she can't just keep, kicking the ball down the road and infringing on Oregonians' rights indefinitely. Any infringement on individual rights is supposed to be minimal. It's supposed to be temporary. Even if it's necessary, it's got to infringe no more than is reasonable, and it's not reasonable. This is just good. Basically, if you look at the very last line of her order, she's essentially saying churches can start meeting again when I say you can, and that's not freedom. That's totalitarianism. And I know opposing counsel took umbrage to that, but guess what, Kate Brown? That's how you come across.
Yes, exactly. So I just want to thank you for the work you did. Your nickname is the PGI Bulldog for a reason, and I know you did a fantastic job making the case for those churches all across the state of Oregon, and business owners, for that matter, throughout the state, for reasonable actions in a reasonable period of time. But what we see taking place has been atrocious with regard to religious freedom. I even understand with regard to the state of Washington, after that happened, that a county opened up, and a county, it was Dade County or Dane County, came out and said, well, we're going to go ahead and have those shutdown orders apply after all in our realm, but we're going to allow churches to open up and have their church services. We're going to make an exception. We're going to change things. So even those places that are pushing back on a local level are still not pushing as far as the state edict or the governor for the state of Wisconsin. To talk with us more about what's taking place among the states, and we have the attorney who heads up our Orange County, Southern California office, Michael Peffer. Michael, what's happening in the different states? What's the trend that we see taking place right now?
Hi, Brad. Yes, thanks. And thanks, everybody, for joining us here. It's a pleasure to be able to serve you in this way. So there's a lot of things happening, and it's kind of fluid. Every day it seems like there's something new that we're getting. So I just wanted to go on a couple. So in Wisconsin, it was interesting that the court there ruled that the governor cannot take this power on to himself, so in Wisconsin, I like this quote: "An agency cannot confer on itself the power to dictate the lives of law-abiding individuals as comprehensively as this order does without reaching beyond the executive branch's authority." In other words, the executive branch doesn't have the authority that they thought they had. So that it's going to be a while before we see how that's going to shake out, because many counties have immediately put back in the order to stay at home in their own legislation. So we're going to have to see where that comes. But right now, the courts have basically reopened Wisconsin, subject to see what happens with the legislature and the governor. So another interesting change, if you will, is that Arizona has finally put out a guidance for places of worship. Arizona's been kind of a strange bird in that Arizona never really expressly said you couldn't meet as a church, but as a practical matter, it seemed as if the order was not to go to church, not to allow open churches. So we will have a copy of that order, the most recent guidance it is. And for those of you in Arizona, just contact us and we'll be happy to get it to you and talk to you about it further. But it looks like there's room for opening in Arizona. In Kentucky, it seems as if the courts have completely reopened Kentucky for in-person services even. So Kentucky looks pretty well open by virtue of a couple of important decisions. Indiana is saying that as of May 8th, there would be some reopening with limitations and social distancing, etc. That's something we'd be happy to get you some further information on that. And then finally, in California, even though California is for certain, it's still closed down as far as the state is concerned to churches. But there's been several counties and cities who we are finding out is allowing for church services. Riverside County, their sheriff has basically said, "Listen, we're not going to prosecute these cases. We're not going to arrest anybody." And San Bernardino County as well has not quite as wide open as Riverside, but they are allowing some church services to go on. They're definitely allowing for drive-in services to go on. It's an interesting thing about the drive-in services, real quick, is that for the drive-in services, the governor and the attorney general in a pleading basically stipulated under oath that that drive-in services are authorized, and but there are some counties and cities who are saying not so fast. We're not going to allow drive-in. So we're looking for the right case to fight those cities that are saying no. Because I think that'll be an interesting way to challenge this. Keep in mind, if you're in the Butte County and El Dorado County, they have allowed for, in California, they have allowed for some reopening to occur. The governor did, but churches are still not on the list of things that are reopening. And even though they're proceeding to phase 2. So
right.
This is, again, changing day by day, but we're here if you have questions, and we'll be happy to answer those questions either on the phone, by email, etc.
Yeah, Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate you staying on top of what's taking place on a nationwide level among the states, but also here in the state of California as well. I just want to remind people what Michael said. We really mean that. If you're in an area where you want to have a drive-in service and they're saying you can't, contact us immediately. There's some great case law already on that. That, we believe, is crossing the line, definitively, unquestionably crossing the line. Now, we have a checklist for the drive-in services. I highly, highly recommend you to use that checklist. It helps us in defending you. So there's no issue. You're above reproach. We also have a checklist for the outdoor services. We also have a checklist for the indoor services. Very detailed. You're going to look at it. Some of you have told me, you said, this is just ridiculous. This is detailed. Yeah, it's detailed because we want to make sure you're in the strongest position possible in terms of actions to be able to defend you in terms criminally, civilly, in terms of liabilities. This is very important. Also, we also see like a number of places like like Kern County. I've heard some great reports there in Kern County for churches. Also in other parts in the Central Valley and far northern California and Redding and other places like that. The general advice is don't assume just because we have the governor's order is there that your local community is going to enforce it. The fact is a lot of these people are up for office. It's reality. And they want to be sensitive to their constituents. And they are the bottom line deciders as to what's being enforced and what's not. So talk to your local law enforcement, as I said before, have the checklist, let them know your church is thinking about having a service. Eventually you're going to have a service. You want to put them on make them aware of the criteria you're using when you do have that service. And then just ask them and say, by the way, if you want us to let you know, let us know if you want us to let you know when we're going to have the service. We'll be happy to keep you in the loop if you'd like. Boom. And you do that, and oftentimes they'll tell you, say, well, it's not a big deal, no problem, we're not going to enforce it. Find out where they're at. If you have a local government, a city or a county board of supervisors voting and saying, we're not going to enforce it, well, then you not only have the assurance that you're not going to have enforcement like you'd have from, say, the police department or the sheriff's department, but you also have a legal covering potentially for liabilities, because what you're doing is under the legal, excuse me, lawful authority of that local government. And that's often very important in terms of your liability for your contracts. That said, you need to look at your contracts and have it examined appropriately. So there's some tremendous possibilities moving forward with regards to that. We now have with us on the line to talk about a specific example that he's implemented in the Los Angeles County. Pastor Peter Mord, who also serves full-time, not only as a pastor, but also as church liaison for the Pacific Justice Institute, in serving the many pastors needing advice and counsel in a very practical way. Peter, tell me, what are you doing? What have you done, and what are you doing now? Because I'm really encouraged by what we're seeing happening right in Los Angeles County, of all places.
Yes, Brad, thank you so much. Well, we've just been following, like many other pastors on this call, something that was, evolving, that we were looking to Pacific Justice to have some info on. And I was reading the scriptures and trying to discern what to do. We decided to start having drive-in services. So we're having a drive-in service, a couple services this Sunday. And then we started a dialogue with the city. And let me just encourage you what Jeremiah 29:7 says. It says, seek the peace with the city. We are supposed to seek the peace with the city. And that means praying for them. In fact, that verse says to pray unto the Lord for your city. And I would really encourage you to pray for your elected officials, your county officials, but then talk to them. And we started to have the dialogue with them. And one of the greatest things that came out of that, and serving the city obviously as well, was the city said, we want to have a weekend of worship. And they're going to allow us next week to have a weekend where we come in and do an outdoor service right at City Hall. They're going to promote it. They're going to have city officials there. They want to let everyone know, the small businesses as well as churches, that they care about the congregations. They want us to meet in a safe way, social distancing, masks, follow the checkpoint list that's provided at pgi.org. But man, we are commanded in the Bible not to forsake the assembling of ourselves together. And many of our government officials have never even heard that verse, that's a command to assemble. And we want to do it safely. But we want to work with our city officials to have a reentry plan. By the way, our city, Palmdale, California, has provided a plan for cities to do what they're doing. And if your city officials would like that plan, they'll make it available to them. But we're so thankful for the religious liberty that we're seeing here in Northern LA County. And I believe there's lots of other cities. Our city isn't, overwhelmingly conservative. And yet they're just in common sense saying, we don't want to discriminate against the churches either. So thank you, Brad, for leading the way in this and helping us to take a step with our city toward religious liberty.
Well, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that very encouraging information. Once again, that's a town, not just a conservative town. It's, it's in Los Angeles County. It goes to show how important local government is. So even if you're in a fairly intolerant county, which is Los Angeles County's reputation when it comes to institutions of faith, as a general rule, relatively speaking, it's still advantageous. You could have a local community, a city that's willing to work with you. And at the end of the day, that's what counts. That's what counts the most in being able to open your church and get it going. I want to mention about something I think is very important to understand. We at Pacific Justice Institute are several flanks we're working on, as you can't tell, as you can probably tell by looking at these discussions. We deal with things on the local level. We're also dealing on the administrative side with model policies that we have adopted for counties to take into consideration. We've been contacted by them, and we provided that, and all the counties in California, as I understand it now, have our recommended policies to allow for safety and procedure to allow churches to safely open without too much of a burden and hindrance, or a fraction of the size of our checklist, just so you know. And we've done this because we know greater and greater authority is being acquiesced or being taken by the counties. And as this happens, they are more and more likely to do, like Riverside County and other counties in towns, starting to come out with their own policies and allow churches to meet. So we're making it very easy for them. And we've done this. We haven't broadcast this. We did no press release because that would politicize it. Politicizing it, it can be very counterproductive, as I've talked about in the past. But this has been very effective. I think it's going to be very effective. Even the governor's office has been working with some in the county board of supervisors that we've worked with, utilizing and referencing and reviewing our policies. So we're hopeful that what they come out with, the governor comes out with, is going to be what we actually provided and recommended. So please pray for that. Also, you can understand, we saw with what Jorge did, working with the governor's office up in Washington State. That was very tactical, very important, and very productive as well. On the flip side, we'll file lawsuits. On the legal side, what Ray Hackey did, we moved in aggressively, very aggressively, did our homework, did our research. We have our team of attorneys working together. So it's not, one attorney who wants to be a superstar. We work together on all these cases to make sure that we have the most optimal, strongest case that we can possibly have. Ray did a fantastic job, and we need to be praying for that judge and praying that we'll have the law enforced. It's very clear cut as far as we're concerned, but we're willing to litigate and do what we need to do to move forward. I had something pop up there. I'm not sure what that was, but also, in addition to working on at that level, I want to address also the criminal defense. We at Pacific Justice Institute are here to provide criminal defense, protection, representation. If your church is targeted, you have a service, and the police come out and they charge you with a misdemeanor, what are you looking at? Well, you're looking at possibly 6 months behind bars, a $1,000 fine. Theoretically, it could be brought against everyone who attends church. So far, that hasn't happened. It happened in one place in Mississippi, and the United States Attorney General Barr pounced them and said, absolutely not. So we're pretty confident the one at risk is the pastor and the church, up to 6 months behind bars, a $1,000 fine. That's as far as the criminal side of it. Now, you have some public relations issues and things like that I won't get into. But that's what we're dealing with in one case up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our chief counsel, Kevin Snyder, is defending that church and that pastor, and we will defend you as well. What we request for you to do is to enable us to do so quickly and expeditiously if that happens, is to beforehand, if you're in a risky area, if you have a scenario where you think there's a good chance you may have a legal action brought against you, you're in an intimidating place, a city that's been hostile to churches perhaps in the past, in that situation, contact our office in Sacramento and ask for an attorney-client agreement. We ask for $1. That's all we charge for representation, completely. We have to charge $1 for legal reasons. I'll just leave it at that. But other than that, it's all without charge. And I encourage you to do that. If your church is poor, talk to me. I may personally reimburse you back, okay? But we want to make sure we have that lined up ahead of time so that as churches open, we don't have to mess around with attorney-client agreements. We can take immediate action on your behalf, as we've done over and over again in the past. But now we have so many churches, so much potentially taking place. We feel that this is the prudent thing to do moving forward, especially as we approach May 31st. Let's talk about May 31st right now. As many of you know, many churches are planning on opening May 31st, okay? That strategically, not legally, it's not going to change anything legally overnight. It may encourage the governor, perhaps beforehand, preemptively, to go ahead and allow churches to open with basic safety precautions and criteria. I'm hoping that's the case. We're not banking on it. So it's a political move. And it's fairly reasonable to believe that the more churches that decide to open up and down the state, the stronger the force is politically for there not to be massive arrests of pastors and fines and criminal prosecutions. Instead, there's a very good chance that we're going to see churches, even local governments that are maybe hostile to some degree, to acquiesce and allow churches to meet, so long as the church is not being foolish but carrying out the basic criteria on our checklist to make sure you're doing things that are reasonable for health and safety. And there's no reason not to expect that churches won't do that. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, in a very powerful decision recently, said it's wrong for the governor to assume in their orders that churches somehow are not as capable to carrying out basic health and safety measures as are being required by others that are allowed to open, like Walmart and et cetera. So that's our belief too. But your church, you need to make a point and really make that a priority, because it also helps us defend you potentially in a criminal action as well. That said, some churches are not going to feel comfortable to open up May 31st, nor necessarily should they. You as a church need to assess your risk, and you need to seek God's calling and his direction more than anything. Ben, let's talk about the risk and the strategy that I've heard play out and we've seen play out. And that is, with this kind of a massive churches opening up and trying to create momentum, there's a basic theory that I play, which is the flanks. You have, in a military battle, and we're not talking about military weapons, okay, just so you know, okay? All right. But in a military battle conflict, you have your strong flank, your medium flank, say your weak flank. What you use to attack first is your strong flank, the one that's not going to give you any casualties, the one that's going to establish a solid momentum and putting the other side in retreat. And then from that victory, you have the next flank move up, which may not be as strong and powerful, but it can play off that momentum. And it also, because of that momentum, it can also be successful without many or any casualties. And then you have the weak flank following after that. To apply this to this situation with the churches, a strong flank is a church that right now could open safely. They're in a low-risk area. They're in an area where in a county area where the county sheriff says, no problem, go ahead and meet. They're in a town where the mayor and the city council says, we're not going to enforce it, you guys can meet. That's a safe zone. They want to carry out the checklist, put law enforcement on notice, as always, but they're able to meet, and they're able to move forward, and they don't have to necessarily even wait till May 31st. Okay, I'm talking about consequences and tacticals, not the fact that you're still violating the law, and I encourage no one to violate the law, but just looking at it from a consequential perspective. Okay, having those church open up before May 31st would be strategically very strong for establishing the momentum from the stronger flank in places like Reading and counties and towns where you've got that cover, if you will. The next flank are those that possibly might wait till May 31st, perhaps. And that is, they would ride the wave of churches that have already opened. They're in an area where there's potentially some risk, but they're not in a hostile area. Law enforcement hasn't said they're going to come out and arrest them. They've given them notice. They haven't said either way. You don't have a hostile neighbors. Your circumstances are more favorable based on the county you're in, perhaps. Also, maybe your church is not a mega church. Maybe it's a smaller church. That's less risk, more rural, more open spaces versus in an urban area where it's crowded and you may have people complaining and be hostile to you. Law enforcement in the past hasn't been hostile to you. You may have an outdoor service instead of an indoor service. That's less risk. So that would be the second flank, possibly on May 31st, playing off the strength of the first flank that started meeting earlier. And then you have churches in the weak flank. Those are places perhaps in the San Francisco Bay Area, perhaps. We have talked to a pastor about this. And he's in an area where he doesn't have friendly law enforcement, doesn't have friendly community. It's very hostile. And after talking to him, he decided, I think I'm going to wait a week or two into June before we open our church. Some churches may say, we're going to wait till maybe July 4th because of their particular circumstances. We understand that. The reason it might be good for churches who are really fearing serious ramifications, and to hold off is because if they go on at the same time as everyone else, and say there's 1,000 churches or 2,000 or 3,000, I've heard some large numbers projected that meet, but let's say you just have a dozen that end up having law enforcement come in, arrest. What's going to make the headlines? What's going to make the headlines are those dozen churches where the pastors are being criminally prosecuted, and it could stealth and the momentum and what's trying to be accomplished in that strategy. Having them hold off and let the others move forward where there are no casualties, that establishes the momentum very clearly, and then other churches can then move ahead. This is just some strategy information. In the end of the day, I encourage you to assess the law, abide by the law, but weigh the consequences. This is clearly in the context of us assessing the consequences of your situation, and that's the context by which I'm saying what I'm saying. Also, regarding home groups, I talked to a pastor yesterday of a good-sized church and an area that's not established as a safe zone. And what he's thinking about doing on May 31 is having home groups come back, excuse me, and not have, he has normally 25, 30 people in a home group. Well, instead, what might be more wise in this situation, in an area that's not a safe zone, is to have these home groups split into three. So have home groups of, instead of 25 or 30, have 8 to 10, perhaps, in a home group. In fact, this can be a great evangelism opportunity. In a meeting in your backyard, spaced, mass, above reproach, every way you can, and you're able to reach out to maybe one or two neighbors and say, hey, by the way, we're going to have a little church gathering in our backyard. Many people can't meet. We're going to listen on the screen to the pastor's message and just have a little get-together, home group get-together. If you'd like to join us, let us know. You know, we just want to keep it small. And that's a great outreach opportunity, folks. And by the way, it's proven to work because that's what they do in China. The fast-growing church group in China is home groups. So this is something that we can be taking advantage of, irrespective of where you are in your risk scenario. But this is something in particular for churches that aren't ready to move forward with a full service or even a full outdoor service, and they don't want, for whatever reason, they don't want to do a drive-in service. This is another option. Is it a violation of the law? Yes, and I don't encourage you to violate the law. But in looking at the risk and the potential consequences, I look at it as very remote in terms of actual enforcement, particularly because the small group, for what we've seen, law enforcement haven't been pounding on doors and prosecuting people because they have small, safe meetings in their backyards. But you have to be the judge of that and assess your situation. Also, I want to touch on something else that's very important. We've received information, and actually it was online, some of you may have seen it. It was Ventura County has come forward and announced that they are beginning a process, a program up and down the state with a couple thousand people working on it up and down the state to monitor people who may have the virus, to go into communities, to test people. And they said that if one person in a family comes out positive and the others are negative, so they don't have the disease, the virus, and it's in a house where there's only one bathroom, then they can't quarantine someone if there's only one bathroom. So therefore, the state, will remove that person from the family. Could be children, could be an infant, a toddler, or could be someone at very, very low risk, and the other people in the family are low risk. But this is what they're saying they're planning on doing. And I had to listen to it verbatim. This is very concerning. We're having one of our affiliate attorneys right now research this to find out more specifics. My concern is that this may be something implemented up and down the state of California and in other states as well. There's presently a bill pending, HR 6666. Forget the numbers. I think it's, anyway, I'm not going to spiritualize that. But there's something going around talking about how that's going to do that. Our attorneys have looked at the language of that. It doesn't require that. It goes around with, to test people in a residential community, particularly in minority communities that are being the hardest hit. It doesn't say they're going to take people out of their homes. It doesn't say they're going to arrest them. So I don't think it's going to pass anyway, the U.S. Senate, because of who's in control of the United States Senate. But so I wouldn't put your focus on that. That's, I think, as a red herring. But there is a real threat in a real way right now with local governments like Ventura County that you need to be careful of. If any of you have anyone in your church that have this scenario with social workers potentially coming in, using this as a pretext to take children from families, contact us immediately, 24/7. I'm accessible on this cell phone, this is my area of expertise among our attorneys. This is my area. And we'll give counsel to whoever needs it, whenever they need it. Just have them call our main office and you'll get that number if it's off hours and needing that kind of counsel. I have to mention it because that's something we're watching, and it could be very diabolical and very, very serious in its outcome. And I put nothing past local government in that regard. With regards to let's move on to the questions now. One of the questions we had was dealing with states. And that is, does it basically have to be dealt with state by state? Well, yes, it does. And the good news is most of the states, the red states, those that have Republican governors, so I'm not trying to politicize this, but I'm just spelling it out because it's so blatant, so blatant. Those with Republican governors, red states, they're moving in the right direction. It's been very, very encouraging, very fast. Churches are opening up. It's been very encouraging. Texas, Florida, and other places. States that are blue states are the states that are the problem. And we at Pacific Justice understand that. As you know, we talked about Washington State, what we're doing there. Oregon, California, Nevada, which is, I guess, a purple state, if you will. We have another office in Colorado. That's another purple state. We are right now, though, have heard a lot of cries for help on the East Coast. And we have to deal with those, and they need that support. So even though it goes against my innate nature as a finance undergrad to do it at this stage with our economy, we've heard those cries, we've prayed about it, and we've moved ahead, and I'm announcing it for the first time to you guys. We're going to be announcing it in a big press release on Monday. But we have just decided and have hired an attorney to open up an office to serve New York and New Jersey. And the reason we're doing this is simple, because it's needed, not because we want to grow and want to be some big national organization. That's not our goal. We just want to make sure everyone gets help. And we've been talking to churches and people in those communities, and they need the help big time. So pray for us. I want to thank those of you who are supporting our work. We really appreciate those of you who choose to support our work. Seek God's direction. I'm not going to ask and beg you. I'm not going to do that. Just pray about it. Seek God's direction. If you feel called to get behind us and support our work as we're moving forward in faith to do this, fantastic. If not, great, no problem. Most importantly, if you need our help, contact us. Doesn't matter if you support us or not. We're here to serve you. That's the heart of our team at Pacific Justice and the people working for us here at our ministry organization. Let's move on to our next question. But we're really excited about that. Oh, by the way, a little bit about God's power and how he works. How God confirms things. This is awesome, folks. So 2 hours, less than 2 hours after I met with the chief counsel, and we made that decision to go ahead and open the office and extend the offer, okay? This was a very short period of time. 2 hours after that, I get a phone call from a Christian radio network with stations and transmitters throughout New Jersey and New York and part of Pennsylvania, I might add, letting us know that they decided, out of the blue, they decided that they're going to air our commentary Monday through Friday. It's on over 500 stations already. And they're going to air the Dacus Report half-hour show every week to let all those people know that we're here to serve them. And I said, do you know what we just did? He goes, no. I said, we just decided to open an office right there to serve New York and New Jersey. Anyway, just God's moving, folks. It's exciting. All right, next question here. I want to be sensitive to your time. I apologize for going off, but I was really excited about that. Are the May 31st churches planning on having people sign waivers? There may be some that are doing that. We don't recommend that. We really don't think, legally speaking, and our attorneys have gone through this, that it's really going to have any kind of significance. But notice is important. And we have an invitation that you can use on our website with the checklist that you can send out, and you can customize as you wish, giving notice to people in your church that they're at risk not to attend. I know one pastor said, well, I'll encourage them to consider not attending if they're in a high risk. I said, no. You need, from a legal perspective, we encourage you to actually to request that they not attend. And that's important from a legal perspective. God calls you differently, so be it. But that's our counsel, and but a waiver is not going to work. Next question is, can the board members of the church be equally charged as the pastor if local authorities pursue criminal charges? That's interesting because it depends on your church structure. If you have a church where the pastor basically makes the decisions and does things, then that's the pastor. And there's some churches that I know very well that have that kind of a structure. Others have elder-based, more of a Presbyterian kind of a model, or they have elders that vote, elders that decide, are they going to have a church service? So it's those who make the decision, those responsible for the decisions are the ones most at risk. That said, so far, it's just been the pastor. That's what we've seen so far, just the pastor. So just take that for what it is. Next question. Regarding contacting the city, which officials do we call? The mayor, the city council, who? Well, first, I would contact, I personally would contact law enforcement. The bottom line people who are going to be coming or going or not, are going to be the law enforcement. They're the ones who are going to be the real problem or not a problem. So I talk to the chief of police if you're in a city. If you're not otherwise, I check out the sheriff for the county. And we already know that some county sheriffs have already said they're not going to do it. Like Riverside County, actually they've come out, the government, the Board of Supervisors says, we're not going to enforce it. That's what we understand. For Orange County, we have the Orange County sheriff. He's come out and says, I'm not going to enforce this. Now that applies to areas of county property that are not under the control of a city and city police, okay? Kern County, we understand that's the same with their sheriff. We also understand it's the same with other law enforcement north of Sacramento County, Placer County, north of Sacramento County on up, with the exception of that on the immediate coast behind the red curtain, they call it, a redwood curtain. Otherwise, north of that up to the Oregon border, law enforcement has been very friendly. So but you want to check that out and find out. It's also could be helpful though, if you have a friendly city council, friendly mayor, they're take to heart where you're at. You might want to ask them to adopt a resolution, not that they're not going to enforce it. That gives you actual legal protection, potentially from a liability perspective. Same with county board of supervisors who adopt the same thing, like with Riverside. Those who are under the authority of the Riverside County, that gives that a legal protection potential for liability purposes and insurance coverage. And by the way, even if you're in a situation where you don't have insurance coverage, in order to have liability, it's the other side's party to prove liability. Number one, that they had the coronavirus. Number two, that they can prove that they got the coronavirus while attending your church. Number three, that your church was negligent and didn't carry out, i.e. our checklist of precautionary measures. That's a very difficult. And then number four, they have to prove damages. Most of them, 81%, are going to have no damages. It's a mild flu. So those are some things to take into consideration moving forward. It says, I want to meet, concern, our churches open to civil litigation if individual contracts COVID-19, either infected or killed. Family members unrelated to the church could sue. Yes, question mark. Well, the answer is yes. They could sue. Anyone can sue. But as I mentioned before, that's the burden of proof that they have to show. That's another reason why many churches, as I understand it, are not announcing big time, we're opening our church with big banners and everything. Instead, they're inviting via email and phone call people who are members of the church that they know, that they trust. Say, we're going to have a church attendance. One church says, we're going to make it clear, do not bring visitors because of liability reasons at this stage, don't bring visitors. You may feel led by the Holy Spirit not to do that, to go ahead and take the risk. There's been times in my life I follow the Lord instead of the safe way, and that's what God wants us to do at the end of the day. But be very careful. That is a risk you're assuming. Hi, if churches open up, what capacity can they open? 50% or 30% or what? The key question, that's a real good question. The key element there, assuming you don't already have a protocol establishing a certain percent of occupancy by city government or county government, is the 6-foot rule, safe distancing. That's a pretty good solid rule to use. Make sure that when any individual or family are placed in a place sitting in a church, outdoor service, indoor service, there should be a 6-foot radius all around them, not just to the left and right, but all around them where no one is, where you have a space, a protective zone, okay? That's the best methodology to use moving forward. And of course, you can reconfigure, you can use parts of your building that aren't used otherwise to make sure that that's being met. And once again, this is good no matter what risk category and what flank you're in, this is just a good policy to utilize. We have another question here. It says, Any guidance for Christian schools, given that UC University System will be closed for in-person classes? I think that's ridiculous, what they've announced. It's absolutely ridiculous looking at the fall. It's way too premature. But that said, that's what UC System wants to do. Whatever their motives and intentions are for doing it, I'm not going to go there. But that doesn't bind private Christian schools or Christian universities and colleges to have to do the same. They need to assess the risk and act accordingly. I personally believe that before this summer is over, that schools will be allowed to reopen and will be allowed to reopen physically and in person. That's my expectation. The UC system and the state university systems that are doing this, I think also gives a great opportunity for Christian schools and universities to be able to actually encourage students to attend and leave public government schools and leave UC and government universities. Who wants to sit all year behind a PC the whole time as a college student when they can have the fellowship and all the community that is really a part of the college environment? That's one of the arguments. I think we're going to see a lot of students demanding that and switching to possibly Christian college universities. So that's an opportunity to take advantage of. It says we can't communion. Why can't communion be passed out, but a Starbucks coffee can in a drive-through setup? Good point. Very good point. What we recommend right now from a safety perspective for churches who want to utilize communion, the safest way is to, before a church is opened up for an indoor service, have the communions put on each chair ahead of time, maybe pre-sealed. You can get those little pre-sealed kind. According to your denomination, you have to work that through, how you want to do it. So that way it's all delivered there. And when they're done, they just leave it there, on the ground perhaps, in front of the chair. And that's how you do it. So the only person touching it, two people touching it, the person who's gone around and put them in all the seats beforehand and make sure that they've sterilized their hand, and then the person who takes it and takes the communion and utilizes it that way. That's what we say for indoor service. Outdoor services, once again, you don't want to have a basket passed out. Same with tithing. We talk about that in our checklist. You want to be very prudent and sure about that. Baptisms, you want to have a water baptism immersion, which is as an evangelical. That's what my church does and other churches from my sphere. You want to make sure that the water is clean, sterilized in a way, or has the proper chemicals to provide reasonable health and safety, but I'm not an expert in that, so I won't go there. Next question. Is it really true that if you are having a parking lot service that you're not allowed to open your bathrooms? That is an element of risk. Is Emily on, by the way? Yeah, sure. Emily, I want you to come on and answer that question, because you're the one who's really done a lot of work on the checklist and putting those together. I think you'd be better qualified to answer. Go ahead.
Sure. There's a lot of questions around bringing in children. I'll start from the outdoors and work our way in. What we're doing right now in the Vegas church, one of the churches, they're doing the hybrid outdoor service. So they had that last week. This week, what they're doing is they're actually having 30 minutes before the main service, 30 minutes just for children to come now. And what they're doing is just slowly acclimating the children into the practices, because it is different. So they're doing it actually kind of a gradual type approach. So when they do get to the indoor services, whenever that happens, for them, what they're going to be doing there is likewise children of an appropriate age. That's for between the parents and the children, if they feel that that's something they can do, taking them into groups no more than 10 with the adult supervisor into their rooms to do their individual child stylized forms of fellowship and worship. And they've got songs and all these things set out just for the children, but it is, something that they're doing in a staged approach. They're doing it now this week with the outdoor service, the hybrid service, in that way, so that children are being brought in. And above all, you want to have expectations that are reasonable for children, and still, of course, letting them remain safe at all times. And actually, really quickly, I'll answer that PPP question since I saw that. I want everyone to know the safe harbor period is ending today, May 14, and we got new guidance yesterday on the necessity requirement, which was that you had to make the certification that taking the loan was necessary due to the economic uncertainty around your loan application. And there's a safe harbor period, a safe harbor for individuals, churches, organizations, etc., who received loans of less than $2 million So the expectation is that if you have less than $2 million in a loan that you receive from the PPP, you have a safe harbor in that your certification was done in good faith. And I'm in Reno, but I was raised in California, to that last question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Emily. I appreciate that. And that's really important. Today is the deadline. So you can go online and you can fill out that information and move ahead with that with a lender. And once again, ECCU I think it's .org or .com. I can't remember. Sorry about that. But you can get that information. This is a very important question. It says if this closure of in-church services stretches out to September, which is what it appears like in the Governor Gavin Newsom's, at least his plan, and some of the other blue states have laid out, which is likely to happen in Santa Clara County. How much longer will it be before the constitutionality of the order is challenged? Let me just tell you something. It will be challenged before September. I will tell you that. And the reason is because simply this. The Governor Gavin Newsom's plan is very flawed. And in the plan, he allows, for example, schools to open before churches and other entertainment athletic events. He puts churches and treats them like an entertainment event, like a movie theater, and that kind of a gathering. And yet allowing schools to meet and children meet in schools, I mean, there's a much higher risk there. Who's more likely to keep their safe space and distance and not touch each other? 8-year-olds or adults who've been trained on this? So it's a very, very weak position for the governor to hold back and prevent churches from opening until September. We at Pacific Justice Institute are watching it very closely. We're doing a lot of research on a number of different angles on this. As you can see, though, we don't want to file a lawsuit that we know we're going to lose, and it's going to set bad case law, because that just extends the time we have to wait before we can file another lawsuit and show the court that things have changed significantly to be able to justify a different outcome, a different verdict. Okay, we already deal with 2 cases that were already passed, where they already filed too prematurely, clearly, and because of that, that slowed us down, in my opinion, moving forward. That said, we are very aggressive, and we're researching right now a number of different theories and contexts to move forward. One of those, however, is as we're looking at the facts in the scenario, is the extent to which other entities are reopened. The more others are reopened, that's greater proof of unequal treatment under the law for religious institutions. That's very important. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeal decision played on that very, very strongly and very convincingly. We see that building, and that's something, one very important point. Also, looking at the risk and the assessment of the risk and the risk factors. We saw, for example, in Wisconsin, that was brought in. Like, is it really reasonable? Can this just keep going on? I mean, is the danger and risk the same as it was initially to justify this? So that's a part of the equation as well. Time is on our side, and as things move together, I see things moving in a very positive direction, both on the legal outcomes across the country and what we're doing, for example, in different states as well right now, but also what I see happening from a community-based level and with churches opening up. I really do believe that churches opening up on May 31st, I think it's going to have a very explosive impact politically. That said, once again, churches need to assess, number one, are they violating the law? I can't encourage them to violate the law, but assessing the consequences, they need to be very astute as to what flank they're in as we move forward, the strong flank, the medium flank, or the weak flank. And I just want to stress that over and over again. And if you have any doubts of what flank you're in, call us. I'll be happy to talk to you. I was on the phone for a good long while last night. Our attorneys are working long hours to do this, and we'll be happy to help you at any time. Do you have a sample resolution stating that law enforcement will not enforce against congregations that might be presented to town council? We have a sample resolution it might be presented to state law enforcement. Okay, so basically a resolution for a city council to adopt saying law enforcement will not enforce this. I don't have a resolution like that. It's something, if the city council wants assistance on that kind of a language, they can contact us, but I'm sure their city council, city legal counsel for their city council, tongue twister there, would be more than happy to be able to put something like that together moving forward. What if you and your wife attend church and does not, where you attend church, does the 6-foot rule apply so that the married couple are separated during the service? You must be 6 feet away from your wife at all times. No, I'm just teasing. A little humor there, a little levity. No, it doesn't apply to you. You can be as close to your wife as you want. And anyone living in your family, that's the key question. Who is living together? Could be a non-family member. You're living together. Could be a college student who's renting a room out from you in your home. That counts as a part of the group. It's like a part of the family for purposes of being together, going places, doing things, not having to do the 6-foot rule. So that's the key question. Are you living together? If you are, you don't have to do the 6-foot rule. When should a church open nursery and children classes up? What is the best way to make that happen? Emily, I'm going to bring you back on for this one because I know this is something we talked about as well moving forward. What's your take on this one as far as opening up nurseries for churches and Sunday school for children?
I would probably say, honestly, in my opinion, not yet. There are some people who are working on checklists based on what we put together, and what they're doing is similar to what I said before, which is a phased approach. So they're saying, we're going to start with the adults, then we're going to be working in the children, and we'll be branching out into the groups like we normally do. Again, it's tailored. We're tailoring it for churches based upon what their regular services are. So it's that's your choice. It's your decision based on whether or not you can be meeting indoors legally, and did I say A? Yeah, A. Then B, what fits best with your usual practices prior to the pandemic and how you can incorporate social distancing, etc.
Okay, Emily, another quick question I want to run by you. Someone wanted to know, what about temperature checks at the door? Is that required? And also, is it something that might be a good idea, particularly if it's a temperature check that doesn't touch the skin and then touch someone else's skin? What are your thoughts?
No, I'm not aware of anywhere requiring temperature checks. If you recall, a couple of weeks back, we talked about the TRO in Kansas. I think it was Maryville Baptist case. Even they did not require temperature checks. You'll see in our checklist, we recommend that in your communications with parishioners, however it is that you invite them, you include that in the list of things you ask your parishioners, attendees to do themselves before they attend. Of course, you can choose to do temperature checks. You'll have to do them you'll want to do them from a distance, and you can use the Ryobi. I have one for cooking that I got at Home Depot, and it will work from a distance, so you can do that. If you do that, again, I would also suggest, if you do have someone who comes with a temperature, have a plan for what you're going to do, where you can put them, how you can help them, et cetera, et cetera. So again, plan, which is something that the checklist hopefully will help you do. And I will say the checklists are best practices. Obviously, you do not have to do all 99 steps. A lot of them may not apply to you, but it's just based on everything, all the input we got, so you can look through it and see what applies to you and what you want to do and what you consider, and maybe some things you hadn't thought of.
Yeah, I talked to a pastor who has a church on the East Coast, and what they're doing is they're utilizing these special kind of cameras that actually can read someone's temperature, supposedly 100 feet away. That's pretty incredible. So I don't know if you want to go that far or not. Michael, if you could come back on, I appreciate it. I'd like to ask you a question that someone brought in here about tracing. We've seen the mayor, I think it was of Kansas City, trying to get churches to give out their list of their church attendees. In case one of them comes down with it, then they can contact everyone in the congregation. The government can do that. Do you think that's going to be required? And if they did try to require it, do you think that would be something that would be constitutional in the United States of America?
Yeah, I think that there has been lots of talk about the requiring of lists of people that are going to church. I would steadfastly refuse that. I believe that there are cases, there is a line of case law which disallows that, and that it's violative of the Constitution. So I think what we need to do with that is look at each individual situation where it's happening. I think the general answer should be no, and then we can contact us and we can talk about, where the wheres and whys of it. It may be a creature to some degree of state law, but there are United States Supreme Court cases which have disallowed requiring members of groups to list their attendees. So I think that's the general thing. I've also seen a bunch of questions about bathrooms for outdoor services. We recommend that you keep the bathrooms closed. And if you're going to do it, if you're going to go through the trouble of doing an outdoor service or a drive-in, whether that be drive-in or on the in some area of land that you have, then you are kind of messing that up by allowing your restrooms to be used. That means you have to keep them in a condition which passes the guidelines. I think the better bet is not to do that, to encourage people to, how should I say it, take care of business before you go there. And I know that's a big deal, but I would not recommend having your restroom facilities inside the church open, especially if you're doing the outdoor services in order to deal, get a foot forward without having to be inside.
Yeah, a little comment. Thank you, Michael, for that. A little comment I would like to make on that is to dovetail what you just said. One thing that some churches have done with outdoor services in view of that is they've shortened their services. I know one church has shortened their service about 25 minutes, and that's important. Also, you want to let your members know, don't drink coffee less than an hour before you leave the house, and use the restroom right before you leave the house. That said, I've talked to some mothers and to get their opinion and input, which is very wise. And some mothers have told me, have shaken their heads and says, what are you talking about? A little child, a 5-year-old, they got to go pee all the time. They have to use the potty often, with little children, it's not reasonable. So you're going to work that through yourself. The ideal scenario is no one using the bathroom. That said, if you have a situation where the bathroom needs to be used and absolutely has to be used, and you can't mitigate that, then, and it is used, if you do have that as your policy, you also need to have a policy where that bathroom meets our checklist criteria. You need to make sure that that sinks, one sink is not right next to another sink, and if it is, that you have a plexiglass wall in between. That's what they have at Costco now. I took a picture of that. I thought that was pretty intriguing. You have automatic hand dryers. Make sure you have a plexiglass barrier in between. And after that person is done using it, have someone come in and do a sterilized cleaning of anything that they could have touched or anything that any body fluids possibly could have touched. You just want to make sure that that's done as standard operating procedure after anyone uses the bathroom, if that's the direction you take. Ideally, it's best, legally it's best, if you don't have that, because that's an element out of the equation of someone alleging how they may have contracted the virus or actually contracted the virus. Emily, yes, you have something you want to talk about. Yes.
I was just going to say legal. It's shockingly, talking about bathrooms is uncomfortable. The courts have shied away from doing that, even when they've granted TROs for in-person. And what I've seen some churches doing here with their hybrid outdoor drive-in type services, they tell people the bathrooms are going to be closed. Please use the bathroom in advance. And they are also prepared, as you said, Brad, with the mothers, in the case of emergency, one person at a time, only one person at a time, and they cleaned it. The pastor's wife was there cleaning it herself afterwards, which I think also, frankly, made people be sure that it was actually an emergency type situation before they used the bathroom.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emily. Another question was, are porta potties an option? Well, I guess they have like a little blue contain, you step in and it's, the answer to that I would say is no, they are not an option. Because you still have multiple people using it and they can still contract it. So it's still very problematic. I would not look at that as an option. They often is seen as just less clean anyway. I have past experiences with those, so I won't go into more detail. But a good question though. Fellowship after church. If outdoors, what's the liability for churches once the service is over? That's a very good question. I know some churches, there was one in Idaho where individuals, they had a very orderly leaving the congregation, leaving the church. and a very orderly service, and that was good. That was good. But then they were escorted one by one, orderly, in an orderly manner, to their car, separate from everyone else, keeping the distance. And then the person got in the car and drove off. I talked to one pastor about this, remain nameless, and he said, "What's the point? They're in there, you know, there's no interaction, there's no fellowship, they're out, it's over." He says, "What's the point? Because fellowship is such a strong part of why we want to see people to be able to come to church again. They get the teachings online, they can sing and worship online, but that fellowship is so important." So my point on this is that, you know, churches, they should encourage people afterwards, outside the church, in the parking lot, perhaps on the sidewalk. If you want to meet, you want to talk, you know, that's up to you, but you need to make sure you keep safe distancing, keep your masks on, don't touch, and maintain a proper protocol for safe distancing. Emily, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's again, I'm going to bring it back to Nevada, Nevada, because that's where I am. But we haven't closed the parks here, so you've got some pastors who are saying, you know what, not on the church property. We can't have a gathering of more than 10. But you know what, if families choose to go and get outdoor air and exercise themselves at the park after the church, that's fine. That's not fellowshipping on church property in proximity. And the other point that some pastors made to me was, you know, what's the point? They come to fellowship and interact. Well, it's something that we can do right now, and we want people to get back into the habit of coming to church in person and seeing, you know, members of their community, even if it's not quite the same as it was. And we're going to get back there. We're not there yet, but it's part of this incremental return to normalcy. So I think that was an important point some pastors have made for me.
Right. Okay, very good. Another question we have here is it possible we will win the battle but lose the war in terms of loss of pastor housing allowance, tax deductions, etc.? I'm glad that was mentioned, because you may win the battle. You may be able to meet, not be criminally prosecuted. But if your community is having a spike of this, and by the way, Orange County, I'm sorry to say, I just found out we had a spike the last day as far as the numbers of people who have contracted the virus in Orange County. Maybe probably northern Orange County, less likely than southern Orange County. But whatever the case, we need to be sensitive to that. Because if churches are meeting at a time when things are spiking, that could be very bad from a public relations perspective, and could be very bad in terms of people's attitude, particularly non-believers' attitudes, when issues like housing allowance and tax deduction and things like that come to the surface. We at Pacific Justice, many of you know, and we defended housing allowance in court before the Ninth Circuit. We got it struck down and dismissed. It's still something that can rear its ugly head again. It would be something possibly from a legislative perspective, if not from a court perspective. And of course, the courts are impacted by who's elected to the White House and the Senate. So it's both judge and electoral process at the same time. And then as far as you know, tax exempt status, there's still some gray areas there with regards to what the courts and how the courts will deal with that, and the basis for losing tax exempt status as we move ahead. So that's something you want to be sensitive to from a public relations perspective, and more importantly, I think from a local community perspective, that's even more important. I think it's also real important, though, not to have your function and your decisions based upon your own security and playing it safe. The Apostle Paul never played it safe. The early church did not play it safe. The church in China did not play it safe. The churches in Iran right now, our brothers and sisters in Christ being persecuted and killed, are not playing it safe. They're being wise, they're being discerning, like the Apostle Paul. And one of my sermons I give at churches, Acts chapter 22. We go through that verse by verse, how he was a model and how he dealt with conflict in a godly way, in a very fruitful way. So at the end of the day, we need to have our eyes on Christ. We need to walk in faith. We need to seek wisdom and discernment. Let us not, though, act out of fear and just play it safe. We got to be very careful on that one. It was a very good question, though. So I salute the person who asked that question. And also our attitude. If you're a church and deciding whether you're to open or not and when to open, the most important question to ask yourself, even amongst all the flank strategy and all that stuff we've talked about and the power of collective opening and things like that, the most important thing is for you to seek the Lord and also to ask conviction of your heart. It's very easy to get in the flesh and say, this is a matter of rights. And attorneys can be like this very easily. It's all about rights. It's about our rights. And we're going to fight this and we're going to get our rights back. And It's not always about rights. Paul sometimes laid claim to his rights. Sometimes he relinquishes rights as well. And that's very clearly in Scripture. The key question then, it's not about rights, and we're willing to defend those. And we will do so zealously, professionally, as God gives us the resources and grace to do it. But the bottom line question here is, what does God want you to do to serve the kingdom and to serve the body of Christ that God's given you as pastors and leaders of your church, and to reach out to the community and to evangelize your community? We talked last week about church homeschool co-ops. Incredible opportunity moving forward, and the opportunity to reach out to churches and members of your church on a local level with phone calls and visitations and things like that. That's critical as we need to remind people the importance of fellowship. But the bottom line, it's what does God wants to do, and to seek the leading and direction of the Holy Spirit, not to your left, not to your right, not from the flesh, but what is God calling you to do? And whatever it is, you can be assured by God's grace and providence that we at Pacific Justice Institute are here to serve you and represent you all the way through without charge. Next week, by God's grace, we're going to talk a little more detailed about the updates of the cases, what's taking place, and as we move forward strategically with the facts and the change in the law and all that's there for you. God bless you all, and let's just close in prayer. Father, I thank you and praise you for what you're doing. Thank you and praise you for the large number of people, pastors and churches that have signed on and participated in this call, for the attorneys. Lord God, at the end of the day, it's all about you. It's what do you want us to do to please you, to glorify you in this day and this hour, in this time of great challenge. We thank you, Lord God, that in you there is victory, and that we can do all things through you who strengthens us and empowers us and gives us the grace and mercy and love to have an impact in our world and those around us. We thank you for your direction through your Holy Spirit now. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you all, and thanks again for joining us. Keep the faith.